Midnight Run, a true horror story. Introduction. In the spring of 2017, Marcus Elliott, a professional runner and fitness coach from Colorado, had a strict routine. He would run every evening after work along a forest trail near his home. It was a peaceful path, surrounded by towering pine trees and known for its calm solitude. But one evening, a seemingly normal run turned into a nightmare that Marcus would never forget. A strange beginning. At around 7 p.m., Marcus laced up his shoes and started his usual jog. The sun was slowly setting, casting a golden hue over the trees. About 20 minutes into his run, he began to feel something off. He could hear footsteps behind him, perfectly synced with his own. He glanced back. No one. Shrugging it off, he kept going, but the footsteps returned, louder, clearer, matching his pace exactly. Something in the woods. He turned off the main trail and into a lesser-used path where hardly anyone ever went. As he slowed down to catch his breath, he heard a rustling sound behind the trees. He shone his headlamp into the darkness and saw nothing. Then, breathing. Heavy, ragged breathing. And it was close. The endless chase panic kicked in. Marcus sprinted. The faster he ran, the louder the footsteps became. He pulled out his phone, but there was no signal. The path twisted into unfamiliar territory, and the trees now blocked the moonlight. He looked back briefly and froze. There was a tall figure in the shadows, unmoving, watching. Its eyes shimmered in the dark, reflecting the faint light like an animal's. The cabin in the dark. Just when he thought he couldn't go any further, Marcus spotted an old wooden cabin. He didn't remember it being there before. The door was ajar. He rushed inside and slammed it shut behind him. The footsteps stopped outside. For a long moment, there was complete silence. Then, bang! The door shook as something slammed against it, but nothing entered. Marcus stayed in that cabin all night, curled up in the corner, waiting for the first light of dawn. When the sun finally rose, he stepped outside. The cabin was gone. The terrifying truth. Back in town, he shared his story with friends and neighbors. One of the older locals went pale and said, "You're not the first." Years ago, another runner had vanished in those very woods during springtime. His body was never found. Some believed his spirit still wandered the trail, searching for a replacement. Marcus never ran at night again. The Night Runner, a real-life horror story from a spring evening introduction. In 2016, Jake, a 29-year-old man from Colorado, was an avid runner. Most nights after work, he would jog along the wooded trails near his home to clear his mind. That particular spring evening, the sky was a bit cloudy, but the cool breeze made it perfect for his usual run. But what happened that night would change his life forever. The run begins. It was around 9:30 p.m. Jake put on his headphones and began his usual run down the dirt trail beside the forest. The beam from his headlamp lit just a few feet ahead. He was enjoying his music and the solitude until something strange caught his ear. Whispers, very faint, but unmistakably human. At first, he thought it was part of the song, but when he paused the music, the whispering stopped too. He took out his earbuds and looked around. Nothing, just the trees swaying in the wind and the crunch of gravel beneath his feet. He shook it off and kept running. The chase begins. A mile down the trail, Jake felt a presence behind him. He turned around multiple times but saw no one. Moments later, he heard footsteps, fast, rhythmic, and clearly not his own. He froze. The footsteps stopped too. He scanned the woods with his headlamp, and that's when he saw it. A tall, gaunt figure standing motionless between the trees, barely visible. Its face was obscured in shadow, but Jake could feel its gaze locked on him. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry. Suddenly, the figure darted forward, straight toward him, running for his life. Jake bolted, sprinting as fast as he could. His legs trembled with fear, but he didn't stop. The path was uneven, full of roots and stones. He stumbled several times, but didn't dare look back. The thing was chasing him. He could hear its breathing, heavy, rasping, unnatural. As he neared the neighborhood, the sound of footsteps suddenly vanished. Jake turned around. Nothing. The woods were still, silent, but the nightmare wasn't over yet. The horrifying evidence. When Jake got home, heart pounding, he reviewed the footage from the small running camera he had clipped to his chest. At one point, the camera briefly caught a glimpse over his shoulder, and what he saw made his blood run cold. A tall, dark figure, cloaked in shadow, was just a few feet behind him. But Jake swore he never saw it with his own eyes. He handed the footage over to the police, but they found no trace of anyone or anything in the area. Since that night, Jake never went running after dark again. Some say there are things in the woods that aren't meant to be seen, and maybe Jake wasn't the first person to meet it. The Night Runner, a true scary story from the Forest Trail. Introduction. In the spring of 2016, a man named Brian from Oregon had a nightly habit, running through the forest trails near his home. These trails were calm, beautiful, lined with tall trees, and brought a sense of peace. But one night, everything changed. Brian never imagined that one evening run would leave him with a terrifying memory that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The nightmare begins. That night, around 8:30 p.m., Brian laced up his running shoes and put on his headphones. The sky was dimming, the sun slipping behind the hills. Like always, he stepped outside and hit the familiar trail through the woods. Everything felt normal. Birds chirping, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the earthy smell of damp soil. But about 15 minutes into the run, Brian felt something wrong. He felt like he was being followed. Footsteps in the dark. He paused and took out his headphones. The forest was silent, save for the usual sounds of nature. Maybe it was just his imagination, he thought. But as soon as he resumed jogging, he heard them, footsteps right behind him, matching his pace perfectly. He stopped. The sound stopped. He started again. The sound returned. This time, there was no doubt. Someone or something was following him. A face in the trees. Brian, now genuinely unnerved, veered off the main trail onto a smaller, lesser-used path, hoping to throw off whoever or whatever was behind him. That was a mistake. Moments later, between the trees, he saw it. A face, pale gray, hairless, with large black eyes. Humanoid, but not quite human. Brian screamed and ran, blindly crashing through branches. His breath was heavy, his muscles burning, but the footsteps never stopped. Running toward madness, he sprinted for over a kilometer until he reached the main road. Looking behind him, nothing. But the sensation didn't leave him. He could still feel it, eyes watching him from the shadows. When he finally got home, his mother rushed to the door in panic. "Brian, it's 11 o'clock. Where have you been?" But he had only been out for 45 minutes, or at least that's what he thought. The truth revealed. Brian reported the incident to the police, but no evidence was found. However, an elderly neighbor who had lived in the area for decades said something chilling. This isn't the first time runners talk about something in those woods. For years, decades, people have reported footsteps, whispers, or seeing strange figures. Especially in the spring, when the days get longer but the woods stay cold and strange. Brian never ran at night again,